Then to seek the opinion of the House to leave out clause 17.
My Lords, I'm not particularly keen on GDPR legislation as it is, so I don't want to use that in raising my support for this group of amendments. I also have been happy to consider extraordinary measures to tackle things like knife crime and gangs, because I don't want to just pretend that there's not a new problem. And I live in Wood Green, and I've seen someone who was stabbed, and it's a horrible atmosphere where you fear for those young people's lives. So what I wanted to raise instead of anything was that my fear is that this has just got unintended consequences, because it is a question of trust. And the young people that we'd all like to prevent from being involved in serious violence need to turn to someone, need to build up relationships with people if they're going to get out of situations where they are involved in potentially violent situations. So to just give a couple of examples from youth workers I've spoken to, a young woman who gets pregnant. She wants to extricate herself from the gang culture, but she is worried that if she goes to talk to people like youth workers, that she'll be accused of snitching on the father of her unborn child, that might lead them into the police's arms and so on and so forth. You can understand the situation. And the youth worker reassures them that this will not occur. But actually, you can't reassure them if the law if this changes in the way as described. Or then there's the young man who actually is considering or trying to get himself out of a situation where he's involved in gangs, but he's paranoid about the police. It's understandable in certain groups that they would think that any approach to anyone in authority would leave them into the police's clutches. But actually, any attempt by a youth worker to reassure them that they shouldn't be paranoid in this instance would be incorrect, because they were right to be paranoid, because actually they are putting themselves effectively into the police's clutches potentially. And so I want to ask the Minister how we can avoid the unintended consequences of this. I know that those individual youth workers, by the way, will not necessarily be affected, but they work for institutions that will have to make data available, and those anecdotes become data and data points, and important information can therefore be shared when it shouldn't be. And I just note that I've told those stories anonymously, that I was given that information without any personal data being passed on, and that if you actually want to seriously develop new strategies for tackling serious violence, that can be done without the names and addresses and personal details being handed over to the police.